many times seem to remain. The collective evidence, if taken to court, would be nearly irrefutable, collectively. And by the time this night is out, I suggest to you, you too, will begin your own journey, your own search of trying to figure out what happens to us after we die. Do we remain on Earth? Do we go to another place? And can we get back from that other place? Houdini is said to have been trying to do so. Set it up before he died, hasn't yet made it. But there are so many, many stories. Now, I'm going to Vancouver next week. I'm going to be doing an episode of Millennium, which I'm going to play myself. But here is a story from the city of my destination, Vancouver, entitled The Headless Brakeman. It's a simple, short story. It is set at the CPR Yards at the foot of Granville Street, Vancouver, have been haunted by a headless brakeman since 1928. Now that was the year that Hub Clark, a railway brakeman, literally lost his head in the yards. One dark and rainy night, he slipped, he fell off a freight train, and his head hit the rail next to the freight track. He was knocked unconscious, and a passenger train speeding down the track severed his head from his body 2 inches below the Adam's apple. Thereafter, stories circulated about how a headless man in railway overalls was seen in the yard on dark and rainy nights. Apparently, for years, Vancouver railwaymen joked, "Don't throw your pumpkin away after Halloween." Hub Clark could use it. The headless brakeman was last sighted on a dark and rainy, very rainy night, as a matter of fact, darting between boxcars in 1942 by a railway worker. The story is told by Ted Ferguson in The Sentimental Journey, an oral history of train travel in Canada. And this is a very, very interesting story. It's a very specific ghost story, or maybe it is. I don't know. It kind of goes with somewhere in time, in a way. Dear Art, this is a rather unconventional ghost story, but it shows how those on the other side can manipulate things. In 1992, I was working as a 911 emergency paramedic in Oakland, California. One night, as I was getting ready for work, I was half watching this TV show about ghosts. One of the stories caught my attention, so I sat down to watch. Now, this might also come under the category of synchronicity. You tell me as you listen. It was about the Hotel del Coronado in Coronado, California. You know, the hotel where Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe was filmed. In the story, this woman named Kate was apparently haunting the hotel. I watched the rest of the story, then ran out of the door, almost late for work. As my partner and I sat waiting for a call, I began to tell her the story that I'd seen on TV. But for some unknown reason, I couldn't remember the name of the hotel. At that moment, we got an emergency call. We ran the call, brought the patient to the hospital. The whole time I'm trying to remember the name of that doggone hotel. Well, we arrive at the hospital and wheel the patient inside. As I'm giving my report to the nurse in the emergency room, I just happen to glance behind the desk, and hanging on the wall is a calendar. And the full-color, large picture on the calendar is, you guessed it, the Hotel del Coronado. Well, I tried to pay attention to these little things, and took this as an invitation from Kate to visit her hotel. So, I reserved one of their smallest, cheapest rooms, and the next time I had a 4-day weekend, I packed up my convertible, drove down the coast from San Francisco to San Diego, Arrived at the hotel, went up to the desk to check in, and the clerk says, "Oh, I'm sorry, all of the small cheap rooms, like the one you had reserved, are booked up." Let me see. Oh, we do have this suite with a balcony overlooking the courtyard in the old section of the hotel. Will that be all right? He said, "I'll give it to you for the same price as the small, cheap, cheesy room you had reserved." Naturally, I say, "Okay," and I'm beginning to think this is going to be a very interesting stay. So, up I go to the bubble bath, drank a beer out of the room bar. Shouldn't do that, by the way, it's terrible. Jumped on the bed, as is my habit anytime I stay in an expensive hotel. I took a nap and got dressed for dinner. Went down to the bar for a cocktail. The bartender brought all of my drinks. Had dinner in one of the restaurants, and when I asked for my check, the waiter told me that a gentleman who had been seated across the room had paid the check. The rest of the visit was uneventful, no apparitions, no funky stuff, until the stay at the hotel never showed up on my credit card bill. Now, I'm a relatively honest person, and under normal circumstances, I probably would have called the hotel bill or not have told them about their oversight. However, when viewed with everything else that occurred, the calendar, the upgrade, the free drinks, the free dinner, it was rather apparent to me that I had indeed been a guest, Kate's guest, at the Hotel del Coronado. She is a fine hostess, and I hope to return one of these days. And I have, of course, like this. And if any of you have a particularly good ghost story, we're going to do two things. One, we are going to tell ghost stories from those of you who call on the following lines. And we are going to also invite you, rather than sending in a fax with your ghost story, if you have a particularly good one, send me a fax with your phone number, and I will call you. I will call you because your odds of getting through obviously are rather slim. So if you just give me a brief outline on the facts of what your ghost story is, and then provide a phone number, I will call you. So we'll experiment, do things a little differently tonight, but make no mistake about it, all night long, we are going to do absolutely nothing but ghost stories. If you wish, call it Ghost to Ghost, call it anything you want, but I suggest you dim the lights and prepare yourself. All phone lines tonight, including the international phone line, which by the way is open. I normally use it for guests, so I don't get a lot of international calls, but tonight it's open. So wherever you are in the world, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, if you have a ghost story, and I do have one sent to me here from Belgium, I've got another one from South Africa. We are heard worldwide. To access this program from any other country, get hold of the AT&T operator. Now that's very important. Get the AT&T operator and have her call in the USA, toll free. Be sure you tell her toll free. 800-893-0903. That's 800-893-0903. But all lines, all nights, all ghost stories. Here we go. First time calling line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Carrie calling from Eugene, Oregon.
Hello, Kay. How are you? You're going to have to get good and close to the phone because you're not too loud.
How's it?
That's better.
All right. Well, my boyfriend's brother, he moved into this house in Providence, Rhode Island, and come to find out, it used to be a funeral home. And, like, they have the places, like, in the basement where, they burn the bodies and did all that crazy stuff.
Cremation.
Yeah. And now he feels like there's a ghost there. Like, things will be missing, like, things you don't misplace, like toothpaste. cutting board, just gone.
Gone.
And one time, his roommate, they were just sitting there drinking coffee. His roommate went into his room because he finished his cup, and he came back out, and it was completely filled with hot. Jason didn't get it for him or anything. And it wasn't even made right how he likes it. And he said sometimes, like a door will slam. One time he actually had to leave because he was so scared because there was like rubbing all on the walls and clanging noise.
Let me tell you a little story back now.
Okay.
I saw a movie the other night. I can't recall the name of it, unfortunately. Now a million people will send it to me. But it was about a man who went to work in a morgue.
Uh-huh.
And he was a guard in the morgue. And he would have his little guard desk, and he'd have his little, guards have keys, and they have to make the rounds and turn the keys so that the owner knows they really made their assigned rounds at night. And he had a desk and a workstation when he wasn't having to make his rounds. And there was this red light behind him. And in the morgue, they would have the bodies all lined up on these cots covered with sheets in what's called a cold room. But above each body, there was a pull cord. A cord you could pull.
Just in case.
Just in case. And should somebody pull that cord, it would obviously mean to the guy sitting at the desk that one of the bodies in the morgue had reanimated. Not unheard of. And I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but I will tell you it went off. Okay?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. Is there who would you go about calling? Say if you wanted to have a specialist come in there and see, what was going on. Any ideas?
Oh, yes. I have many people. In fact, the guest I'm going to have on this coming Monday night might be exactly the person you're looking for.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because, they have...
His name, Allison, is Jerome Clark, and he wrote a book called Unexplained, Strange Sightings, Incredible Occurrences, and Puzzling Physical Phenomena. Now, he'll be here Monday night, Tuesday morning next week. Somebody like that is the kind of person you need. Okay?
Definitely. Thanks so much for your help.
You bet. Take care, and good luck. Wildcard Line, you are on the air.
Yes, Art, this is Greg from El Cajon, California.
Hi, Greg.
How are you, Art?
Just fine.
I have a good one for you.
Okay.
Do I have about 4 or 5 minutes?
You do?
Excellent. My wife's mother had died back in February, actually on February 13th of this year. And prior to her death, my wife and children and I had stayed with her overnight in that house on many occasions.
Sure.
It was just a normal home. Nothing strange, very comfortable there, no problems whatsoever.
You would just be visiting her and stay the night.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Taking up the house at the time of her death went into probate. And of course, my wife and her siblings not wanting to leave the house empty, of course, because of vandals and that sort of thing. My wife and our 2 daughters and our unborn son moved into that empty house on March 1st of this year.
Makes sense.
Shortly after, my family and I took occupancy of the home. Certain events started to take place.
Like what?
Well, just to paraphrase, so also at this time, on around March 10th, we adopted a German Shepherd Beagle mix that it made my wife feel a lot better, of course, because I work late at night, sometimes till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Like me.
Yeah, there you go. And it gave her a peace of mind because the house was out in the country. Okay.
Like me.
Yes, sir. And within this first 2 weeks that we took up residence in my wife's deceased mother's home, my wife would relay to me from time to time that she felt as she was being watched intensely. I myself, at the time being a complete skeptic, dismissed the information as an overactive imagination, which I probably should not have. That was my belief until the evening of March 16th, 1998, when my eyes were widely opened. On that evening, I was having dinner with my wife and children, and my sister-in-law and her two children, teenage children, were over to the house for dinner, just a few weeks after moving into the house. Everyone had left, but my wife and I was sitting in a position in the dining room, at the dining room table area, that allowed me to look all the way down the hallway into one of three bedrooms, which was my youngest daughter's at the time.
Sure.
At that point, I saw something that is still hard for me to describe. It was an aura of what seemed to be a woman's form, with a lot, to me, of what seemed to be energy.
In other words, indistinct, kind of a foggy light aura.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And it definitely was. It seemed to be the shape of a woman to me. I was so motionless and locked into what was happening at the time that I almost lost relative consciousness of where I was, except for what was going on in that room. My wife was sitting over to the right of me and asked me what I had seen, and I described it to her. And she said something to the effect of, "You too?"
You too?
Yeah.
You mean she saw it as well?
She had seen and felt things before me, and yet had never, over that period of time, that 2-week period since we'd moved in there.
Can you hang on through the break?
Absolutely, Art.
Stay right where you are. When one sees it, you can imagine a bit of undigested meat. When two see it, well...
In the Kingdom of Nye from outside the U.S. First, dial your access number to the USA. Then, 800-893-0903. If you're a first-time caller, call Art at 702-727-1222. From east of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. West of the Rockies, including Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. Call Art at 1-800-618-8255 or call Art on the wildcard line at area code 702-77-1295. This is Coast to Coast AM from the Kingdom of Nye.
My suggestion, turn the lights down, turn the radio up, get as comfortable as you can, because some of what you hear is going to require you be in a nice, comfortable place. By the way, with respect to my story about the Hotel Del Coronado, I just got this. Hi, Art. My sister-in-law actually works at the Hotel Del Coronado as a concierge. She says the ghost stories are real, and you can, even if you wish it, rent. I repeat, you can rent the haunted room. That's from Jeff in Amherst, Ohio. Wonder if that's really true. Thank you, Jeff. And by the way, for any of you who have ghost stories out there, just send me a fax and tempt me. Tell me how good it is and give me a phone number. And if I am tempted enough, I will call you and get you on the air. My fax number is area code 702-727-8499. If you can't tempt me in one page, you can't do it. So hold it to one page. And now, back to the gentleman who saw the apparition down the hall in the bedroom and then turned to his wife, and his wife saw it too, right, sir?
Yes, she had seen it, but it was at a different time.
And so then what? I mean, did you sit there and compare notes with her, or what?
Well, I had the hair was standing up on the back of my neck, Art.
I'm sure it was.
And I didn't know what to think. I just moved my wife and my children into a house, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there.
Did you think about getting out?
You know what? At that point, I really didn't know.
You know what? I actually, it's so easy to say, man, I'd be out of there like a shot. But the fact of the matter is, There are financial considerations, there are physical considerations. You have a wife, you have children, you have a lot of furniture, you moved into a house. So you don't just immediately make a decision to split.
Let me tell you, Erica, the rest of my notes that I have here for you that I compiled today, you're going to think more and more why we didn't actually get out. On or around March 22nd, I was alone in the house. And my wife had left with her sister and my children. They went over visiting for the day. It was around the noon hour. I was preparing to leave for work. I'd just come out of the restroom that adjoined our master bedroom. Bear in mind, our bedroom used to be my deceased mother-in-law's bedroom.
Oh.
In a fairly quick instant, as I looked over my right shoulder, and I can see this as plainly as the day that, in my mind, is the day that I did see it. In just a few seconds' time, I saw my deceased mother-in-law leaning over the dresser area where her dresser used to be in her room. And it appeared as if she was leaning over to place something down.
This time she was of more form.
Yes. Shortly thereafter, that situation, our interesting and strange phenomena began to occur. My deceased mother-in-law there was a beautiful type plush white carpet, very white carpet in her home. It was throughout the home. There was no variance throughout any of the rooms whatsoever. I'm just giving the details so the listeners understand what I'm about to say. One morning, I would believe it was the end of March, 1st of April, my wife said, "Honey, come look at this." And I said, "Well, when you walk barefoot on the carpet, Art, it would leave almost a type of imprint of your foot."
I understand exactly what you're saying.
And so we experimented a little bit. This was not my wife's footprint, Art. It wasn't my footprint. And it was much too large to either of my daughters.
Sure.
So we just stood there looking down, and my wife said, "I know it's my mother's. I know it's my mother's footprint, and she lived with her mother until she married me until she was, 19 years of age." She felt that, also too, from that time on, that the constant set of eyes or being watched was all the more ever present. Our dog, on many occasions, Art, would stand up and stare across the house into our bedroom, whining, staring. And it's not enough.
I'm going to ask, it's an embarrassing question. You don't have to answer this, but if it was your wife's mother running the house, present in the house, didn't that kind of take the edge off moments of intimacy for your wife?
Well, at that time, Art, that is a personal question. My wife was only about 3 months from delivering our son.
I see. You say no more. That's
She was
fine.
very pregnant.
Otherwise, I can imagine it would be.
I can understand what you're saying, and I do agree with that.
Mom, if you're listening, you know what I mean.
In the summer months, another factor started to come into play, and this is one when I was writing it earlier this evening, because I'm listing this in as much in chronological order as I can.
Sure.
I was reluctant to discuss this, and the only reason I am discussing it right now is after we moved out and we're living where we're living now, I asked my wife if she, I didn't want her to think I was nuts. So I asked her, and she looked at me and said, yes, I had to, and this is the next part of the story. At night in my wife and I's bedroom, which of course was my deceased mother-in-law, at times my vision in the dark, I would lay awake at times and it would start to blur. Eerie, if not demonic type faces would appear in the dark room. They would come, it was very sharp to me, and they would fade out slowly.
That would be enough for me.
The thing that bothered me about this, Art, was if this was my mother, it wasn't that obviously to me was not my mother-in-law.
Obviously.
Her appearance was not as foreboding as this particular situation. And that's when I started thinking, my God, is there a portal or something followed?
That's exactly where I was about to go. We've got to wrap this up, but that's exactly where I was going. Is there a clothesline to this, or is that essentially, did you get out of there, or what?
Well, at that point, those things were starting to happen at the end of the summer. There were thumping noises on the wall. The occasions at the noon hour, almost on certain days, frequently the phone would ring. There would never be anybody there. And the one thing that I would like to say, Art, and this is probably of some interest to you, I often wonder at this point if the intrusion, taking as nothing but a appearance by my mother-in-law in the last few recent days to my wife, has appeared. There hasn't been anything since we moved to our new home.
Well, all right. Listen, thank you so very much. There are two things here. One, it's pretty well known, and I can't explain why. Maybe you can. Maybe one of you can. Why a spirit, apparently trapped on Earth, or one that has not yet moved on, remains essentially in the same place, the same house, same geography, the same place. One. And the second thing that I would draw from that is, he said it himself. Do you think it might be true that once something has come through, or is visible on both sides, depending on how you want to look at it, that in essence a portal has opened, allowing not just the spirit of his mother-in-law, but more to come through? That's worth some thought. On our international line, you are on the air. Good morning to you.
Hi, this is Mark from Auckland, New Zealand.
Auckland, New Zealand. Yes, sir. Welcome to the program.
Yes, I have a bit of an unusual ghost story to tell.
All right.
I frequently have out-of-body experiences, and one time I managed to catch a glimpse of my own ghost.
What? What?
Yes, sir.
Now, if anyone would stop me from having OBEs, assuming I could have them at will, that would do it. You saw your own ghost.
Yes, well, people who frequently have out-of-body experiences know that you can sometimes get stuck in your corporeal body or physical body. This frequently happens to me, and this one time, a part of me separated while my vision remained in my body, my physical body, and I saw this watery...
Oh my! In other words, you saw your spiritual self in a visual way, with the vision from your own body leaving your body?
Yeah, I saw it walking across the room. Well, I saw myself walking across the room. It's like a third person perspective.
Did that stop you from doing that?
No, I've had more hair-raising experiences than that. That was an unusual though. No, it hasn't stopped me.
It would have stopped me cold. All right, my friend, thank you. That's from New Zealand. That would have stopped me cold. To have the physical vision remain in a somewhat active mind, and to see your spirit leave your own body, and to realize that your essentially dead, spiritless body is observing its own spirit leaving. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, where are you?
I'm in Austin.
Austin, Texas. All right.
This story is kind of secondhand because it's something my mother told me happened before I was born.
It's all right. What is your name?
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, Sarah.
Yes. She was living in Salem, Massachusetts with my father. They'd gotten married recently.
Right.
And in the house they were living, I think it was probably an old house, these things started happening. First, the cat started acting weird.
Like they'd be running across the room and all of a sudden they'd stop like there was a wall in front of them.
Yes, I've seen cats do that many times. They see things we don't.
Yep. And once or twice she said she found them in shut dresser drawers.
Cats?
Yes. They'd have gotten inside the drawer and it was shut behind them.
Yeah.
She was alone in the apartment. And once the bathroom door was stuck. And she wasn't sure why it was stuck. She kept trying to get it open. My father wasn't home, so she had to get a neighbor to help her open it. And it took him a lot of work to get it open. And when they got it open, it was like 20 degrees colder in the bathroom than it had been anywhere else in the house.
Really?
Yes. And then my father would start, he would say he felt a hand on the back of his neck. So my mother was across the room or in a different room and there was no one else in the house. And then the last thing that happened, my mom said this was the last thing that happened, and after that nothing ever happened. My father came in the room where she was, and he was like all white and shaking, and told her that he had been walking up the stairs, and he saw this woman walking down the stairs towards him, and that she was wearing like old-fashioned clothes. That was all they told me. I didn't get any more detail than that.
Yes.
She was walking towards him, and then when they passed each other on the stairs, he felt like totally cold all the way through, and then she vanished, and then they never saw anything else again.
I sure do appreciate the story.
Yeah, I thought you'd want to hear it.
Now, you're right. Thank you. I wonder what it is about the presence of an entity that causes temperatures to drop. And by the way, I might add measurably drop. I have interviewed any number of ghost researchers, and it's about half and half. Some say they're unable to measure the temperature drop, but they can certainly feel it. The other half say they have measured up to, as this young lady said, up to 20 degrees or more of difference. Sometimes right down to freezing. She mentioned cats and brings to mind the following. Again from Canada. Canada must be a very haunted place. Where I live, we have woods by our house, about 7/10 of a kilometer by 6/10 of a kilometer in size. And in this woods is a man some time ago who hung himself, actually 70 years ago, when his wife had died at an early age. 70 years ago, the land that everyone is now living on was farmland. And ever since those woods have been left alone. The only thing about the man was he was a cat lover. He had about 4 cats. And I can tell you there is something about those woods that is pretty freaky now. Every now and then, even now, there is a gathering of cats in the woods. No lie, I've seen them. They just sit around, 10 to 20 of them. Tell you what I'll do. I'll try and get a picture of it next time it happens. I believe the cats are gathering in this man's name. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Aloha, Art. This is Mike calling from Kihei, Maui, Hawaii.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Actually, I told you this briefly a few years ago. My wife Bonnie and I had gone over to Kauai pre-Iniki, the year before Iniki hit.
Oh, the big terrible hurricane.
It was a nasty one. We stayed at an older, fairly flat resort called the Coco Palm. It was nice. We had driven around the day. We went back to the hotel, pretty tired. And we went to bed after listening to the little band downstairs. Sometime in the night, I woke up, was on my back, in the bed, and something fairly large, kind of glowing, was at the foot of the bed. It was human shaped, and it scared the bejesus out of me, to the point where I was petrified and could not move.
Describe it more than that. Human shape. Sort of a mystery or try and do a little better.
Well, at least 7 feet tall. If it was a person, it probably would have weighed several hundred pounds.
Oh, so this is very large.
like 250, 300 pounds.
All right.
The perception I got was that it was kind of glowing like a glow stick. You know those green glow sticks you crack at night?
Yes.
Okay, well, it scared me so bad, all I did was close my eyes. Whatever it is, it's gonna go away. I'm closing my eyes. That's it. Woke up in the morning, my wife and I finished our time on Hawaii, and to Oahu, and driving from the airport over to Polly to the other side, I told her on the Polly, I said, you know what, Dave? Last night, there was something in our room. And she turned to me, and the chicken skin started. That's when you get the goosebumps.
So they call it Hawaiian chickens.
She freaked out with her big Hawaiian eyes and looked at me and said, I saw it too. And I said, well, what did you see? Apparently she must have seen a little more than I did, and or perceived more than I did.
Maybe she didn't close her eyes.
I sure did. My wife says that she saw a very large Hawaiian float in through the window and stand at the foot of our bed. And to her, she said it was very pissed off. It was
Pissed off Hawaiian.
a pissed off Hawaiian. Now, I'm white. My wife's almost pure Hawaiian. I'm wondering, is this a Hawaiian ghost looking down, seeing a local woman with a white man,
I heard it.
angry?
introduces our listeners to the scientific approach to discussion of two particular subjects: UFOs and near-death and after-death experiences. To contact the Bigelow Foundation during the work week, call Angela Thompson between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. at area code 702-456-1606. That's Angela Thompson at area code 702-456-1606. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to from Las Vegas to the West on KDWN 720. The Talk of the West. I'm Marcel. And it's going to be quite a program this evening. We've got, as always, George Knapp, and with a glimpses into other realities, Linda Howe in Philadelphia, and then all the way from New Jersey, I think you're going to very much enjoy Richard C. Hoagland. And so there's a lot to get to. Let us begin getting to it right away. George, good evening to you. Great to have you back again.
About 65 minutes ago, the 1993 International UFO Congress kicked off in the Children's Hotel here about Vegas. Former Air Force Colonel General Stevens. Really incredible collection of UFO photos. And the others are separate collections. Such photos are always fun. All over the world that are clear and crisp, daylight type shots, hard to dismiss whether or not all of them stand scientific analysis is something I can't answer. Some could be hopefully I suppose, but when you see this entire package, it's very impressive. This conference will last a full week. There are several extremely interesting speakers on the line. Dr. John Magdalene, Harvard Medical School, scheduled to speak about the induction phenomenon, as is Dr. Jason Jacobs of Temple University. Ted Oliphant, the Pike, Alabama police officer, is slated to talk about his 2-year investigation of cattle mutilations in North Alabama, activity which has repeatedly been correlated to UFO sightings there and elsewhere. The founder of the first UFO research organization in China is on the schedule, along with a man named George Wingfield, one of the world's best-known crop formation researchers. 2 days of the program are dedicated to abduction research, and for what it's worth, there's also a full day of presentations related to channel information. This is a very controversial area, even within ufology, but it's probably good to keep an open mind even about topics which might seem to be ridiculous. I mean, science fiction today becomes science tomorrow. Anyway, it's a heck of a lineup, and folks who are interested might want to head down to the show sometime this week. We told you last week about multiple witness UFO sightings in the northwest part of the Las Vegas Valley. Now we're getting reports from the Henderson area about large, luminous, triangular craft that reportedly perform these flip-flop and other gymnastic-type maneuvers on a semi-regular basis. And if anyone is listening in the Henderson area, we'd like them to call us and let us know what you're seeing out there. Mexico continues as a UFO hotspot. Several dozen impressive videotapes of unidentified objects have been captured in the last 6 months. The activity shows no signs of abating. A Mexican organization which calls itself the Vigilantes has been taking out the sky around the top bases in the Mexican state of Morelos, as well as in the mountainous region called Teco, about 300 miles outside of Mexico. So these are full of activities reported and reported. Anyone interested in UFOs who has an original idea about the nature of this phenomenon might be in line to win $1,000. A man named Dr. Alexander Imich has offered a prize of $1,000 for the best original paper contributing to the understanding of the UFO enigma. Submissions can be critical, empirical, philosophical, speculative, in any of the many disciplines covered by ufology. The deadline is June 30th, 1994, and Angela Thompson of the Bigelow Foundation has further details if anyone's interested in pursuing this prize. One note for Las Vegas residents, the local MUFON chapter, that's Mutual UFO Network, will meet December 14th at the Las Vegas Library across from Cashman Field. MUFON, is a pretty solid organization. It's surprising that it doesn't have more support here in Nevada, considering the high level of interest there is in UFOs. Such organizations, of course, are what you make of them, and I recommend anyone who wants to get to the bottom of the mystery might want to consider getting involved with MUFON. Finally, don't forget the lunar eclipse tonight, supposed to peak around 10 o'clock, I think, for West Coast viewers, right after this program, so our listeners should probably listen to the show, then bundle up and go outside, and I really look forward to hearing Richard Hoagland regarding the Mars Observer and all the stuff we've been talking about the last couple of weeks.
George, I'm curious. You kind of hit on something that I'm very curious about, and that is the level of UFO interest here in Nevada versus elsewhere when we are virtually the center of almost all the activity.
And we're seeing a lot of activity. I think there's activity all over the country, but I think it has a lot to do with your program and some of the key programs that I've been involved with here. I don't think there's a hotter area anywhere in terms of public interest in the topic. I mean, I can't go anywhere without somebody raising the subject. Somebody who's interested in MUFON or some of the other UFO organizations that go into it. Wonderful to have you, George.
Thank you. That's George Mann. And he kind of keeps us up to date on the very latest of what's going on. All right. Quick switch of gears all the way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for another glimpse into another reality. This is Linda Howe. Linda, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Oz.
Hi.
So when it comes to discussions about other realities outside the discussion world, what are the discussions of that typically do? The introduction syndrome, unusual surface features on Mars, or visual movies, or the stuff tonight, the worldwide animal mutilation, or other mysteries. One of the constant themes in the investigation is an apparent policy of trying to get information on the government concerning these problems. Recently, I interviewed a deep cattle rancher who talked to me about a recent mutilation on his ranch and his thoughts about why there might be a policy of silence. Our Gaia lives in a grain farming and cultivating region at the eastern end of South Dakota in a small town called the Smith. In October, he found 3 of his cattle dead and mutilated. The first 2 were cows, and the third was a Charolais bull about 3 years old that weighed at least 1,800 pounds. He decided to the bull was alive and well 2 days before he found the animal on October 24th inside a fenced pasture with both of the gates padlocked. As this buyer approached the dead bull, he could see a complete testicle lying on the ground near the body, cut right out of the throat and flesh. The other testicle was found too, but was never found. There was no blood in any of these cuts. The penis had been removed, part of the teeth around it had been cut sharply straight across. The rectum was pulled out and the bladder was closed. And the blood was been cut by 2 straight cut lines deep into the car's throat. One pair was on the ring was cut and the ground spread. So it looked like teething being presented. Unquote. This is a type that has been photographed and described on other mutilated animals for the past 30 years. There were no tracks around the bull, no signs of struggle, and predators would never go to the body of the bull. Mr. Geyer also found odd strips of hair missing and a small hole like a biopsy plug. He told me recently in a conversation that until he saw these animals, he was not accepted that there was any reality to the animals. From that conversation, the 2 also discusses what appears to be a policy of silence. And we will begin with his discussion of a very strange missing hair and a strange picture being represented the biopsy plug on this 1,800-pound bull.
Yeah, on that bull, we found there were 2 marks on his neck. About 6 inches long and about 4 inches and 4 or 5 inches apart. And the one of them, the hair was just real straight there, not completely. On the second one, the hair was, some of it was gone, but not like the first mark. Like he'd been, his neck had been clamped in something, or, you know. And then, downside, then there appeared to be like a hole or a break in the skin that went in. We didn't think it was a bullet hole because it would have had been, you know, some underneath.
There have been what people refer to as biopsy plugs removed from animals over the past 30 years. They've been about 1/4 of an inch wide and about 3/4 to an inch deep. Is that similar to what this one?
This would look like it was maybe a little bit bigger than a leg pencil. You know, maybe it's not a 1/4 inch, but maybe a 3/8 inch hole. And it appeared like it went in maybe an inch or two. There sure wasn't anything come out on the other side or out, you know, anything. It's like a bullet would have probably done.
It is similar to these what have been referred to as biopsy plugs. How much did that bull weigh?
Well, as a 3-year-old Chevrolet bull, and I estimated the weight probably around 1,800 pounds.
Now, could you or any human easily walk up to, let's say, not you because you know the bull, but could a stranger walk up to an 1,800 pound bull, easily stop it in its tracks?
They might be able to walk up to one, but, you know, in the fall of the year, the bulls a lot of times will kind of separate off from the females from the cows. And they're more docile in the fall of the year. And somebody could probably have walked up, you know, within 10, 15 feet of the bull that was laying down. But they could start tranquilizing it or shooting it or, you know, completely get rid of it in some way. You know, there's no way to
Right, because a lot of people do, no sign of struggle whatsoever in that basket.
No.
Nothing. Well, it isn't typical of the animal mutilation, but this why law enforcement long ago started looking up into the sky for an answer as to what was happening to them, like the next guy I was earlier talking about whether they were in helicopter activity and light activity. I don't know if they started anyone in service. So, did you see the bull a day or so before you found it dead of mutilated?
I'd seen it about 2 days before when I was about 2 bulls and that's particular task for the rest of the winter. About 2 days previous, about 3 days before I found it. And they were just, they haven't been done just being sick or anything like that.
And this is clearly highly unusual cuts all over the place.
Yeah.
And if you, as a rancher, knew that there was some kind of other intelligence and somewhere else in the universe involved with these animal mutilations, what would your reaction be?
I guess I wouldn't, I'm kind of practical, and I don't know whether I would believe it unless I seen it, but I didn't believe there was any cattle mutilations until I seen that bull either. So, I wouldn't necessarily disbelieve anything. It wouldn't be it was kind of frightening, but I guess I wouldn't be disturbed or anything if I didn't know or didn't see something that was.
If that were true, and there does seem to be some evidence of eyewitnesses who have seen animals with what they call non-human creatures that were either later found mutilated or disappeared, what would you think about the government's policy of silence?
Well, I don't know. It's just, I guess, at the end of the day, that either they're trying to keep a secret to keep, from hysteria, from the people, or maybe, if they tried to make contact with them or anything like that, well, that they haven't been able to do it, and so they're just trying to keep it quiet. But there's other life form that might threaten us, or, that might be helpful to us either one. I don't even know if the people that are looking up.
Well, they found the comment either way. One or other should be in on contact with another intelligence on this planet. And that is coming from a rancher who has been in the eastern side of South Dakota, a remote area, for several decades, and has seen a lot of animals dead from disease and predator, but he has never seen anything like what happened to these 3 trials in October.
Yeah, particularly impressive when it was the line, I would not have believed it heaven had I not seen it myself.
That's right. That's right.
Incredible.
And in this particular case, we did have the sheriff come. The sheriff said after sight, yeah, there's no question. And it's something that you knew how to do surgery on the animal was involved. And then the sheriff and the chief of the state veterinarian. And there was apparently no necropsy done and no physical investigation. There were some photographs, and there was a statement made by the assistant state veterinarian to the Rapid City Journal newspaper and to another local newspaper, disregarding actually any necropsy or pathology examination, which they did not do, and they simply dismissed it as predator. And this is something that is a puzzle also. We are not examining these animals scientifically, and if we did, perhaps we'd all learn a great deal more about this strange phenomenon.
I wonder, Linda, if perhaps the foundation, as you mentioned, they're not examining these animals. I wonder if it would be in the interest of the foundation, probably something you can't answer, to see to it that an examination of that sort is done. We need some answers.
Yes, and Dr. Altshuler, John Altshuler in Denver, I think he's going to be on the Over 2000 in a few weeks. He's been working with me since 1989, helping me do something. And in fact of that, sheriffs and deputies and the general ranching population know that we will do these examinations. We have not charged anyone anything for them, but we need to be contacted. So if anybody does have one of these strange animal things, we need to contact with me, and we will put some honest pathology on the animal.
All right, and toward that end, I guess we better give them a way to do that.
Right. I didn't do it for letters from the listening to the over 2000. Back from the window, that post office box 538 in Huntingdon Valley, Pennsylvania, spelled Hunting, B as in dog, O-N, Huntingdon Valley, Pennsylvania, and the zip code is 19006.
All right, wonderful. Linda, as always, it's been fascinating, and I'll look forward to hearing from you next week.
Great, Art, and thanks.
Thank you. That's Linda Howe from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And there you've got it. It's still going on. Isn't that fascinating? Absolutely fascinating. And I think she's going down the right road. I think examinations and some sort of understanding of what this is all about. It's high time. All right. Once again, we switch gears. And we've got a fascinating guest this evening, Richard C. Hoagland. Richard C. Hoagland is a former science consultant to Walter Cronkite of NBC News, Cable Network, NASA, and author of The Monuments of Mars, which is fabulously popular. At NASA's request, he has now repeatedly presented his continuing Mars findings regarding the Cydonia region of Mars to thousands of NASA engineers and scientists at the Goddard Space Flight Center and Lewis Research Center. Hoagland was also a featured speaker on his Team Cydonia investigation at the 1990 Aerospace Education Services Project. That's a conference at the Lewis Research Center designed to train and brief specialists on current NASA projects. In February 1992, he presented his team's results regarding Cydonia in an invited address to delegates and staff at the United Nations. And let's take care of that noise. There we go. Richard C. Hoagland should be a fascinating guest. As you know, the Mars Observer, as best we know, or at least with information given to the public, is still lost in space. So, all the way now to New Jersey, and Richard C. Hoagland. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Art.
Welcome to the program. Good to have you.
It's nice to be there. On my voice, I seem to have picked up a cold somewhere along the line.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'll stay away from the phone. Richard, though I don't think we've ever connected before, I've been doing programs like this for many years, though not this specific one. And I've heard a lot about you. You've been pretty high profile. I guess the place to start with you is Mars, and in the little topic of discussion thing that sent to me, you were already, prior to launch, and I guess this was written prior to the launch of the Mars Observer, you were already feeling that we weren't necessarily going to get all of the yield of information before it ever got started. Was that accurate?
That is accurate, but there's really nothing serious because actually, any planetary mission that it ever sent anywhere, planning not to show us the data, the images, that it was going to get from Mars Observer Live. Now, there has been some confusion about what we mean by live. These spacecraft are robots that are sent out across the solar system. The first mission NASA ever sent anywhere that was successful was the Ranger 7 mission that crash landed on the moon at about 9:15 in the morning of July 28, 1964. And I was at a small museum in Springfield, Massachusetts, at the end of the telephone line linked to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, where about 1,000 other reporters and press people and scientists and whatever had gathered to see this mission. And what NASA arranged for the press was live television in the auditorium, so the press and the networks could pick up TV live as this spacecraft, the first sent to the moon, that was successful with a state-of-the-art television system built by RCA, could basically give these images to the entire world. Although at that time we didn't have satellites, so it was limited to those people in the auditorium, and then you had to, fly the tape to New York or send it by AT&T long lines or stuff like that. So it was kind of an arduous process. But NASA, even in the very beginnings, back in the 60s, a few years after it was formed, prided itself on showing us live pictures from other planets and other planetary missions. For the first time in its entire history, Art, they had planned and had announced before the launch in September of 1992 that on Mars Observer, for some strange quixotic reason, they were going backward instead of forward. The technology has gotten so good that you basically can see this stuff on a desktop computer, all right?
Right.
But the NASA folks were telling us and giving us all kinds of bizarre, multi-page memos and excuses why it was going to take Dr. Michael Malin, the guy whose camera was flying on the spacecraft, up to 6 months to generate the pictures. I mean, it was absolutely asinine. And it doesn't take, a rocket scientist to see that it was basically a cover. It was basically designed to prevent the American people from seeing what we have worked so hard to try to validate, and that is the possibility of extraterrestrial ruins on Mars at a place called Cydonia.
Boy, that's incredible. Richard, hold just one moment while I ID the station. We'll be right back. Richard Hoagland is my guest, and he, as you know, is the author, or should know, is the author of The Monuments of Mars. We're going to be talking a lot about that this evening. Stay right there.
From Jackie Gons Plaza downtown, this is KDWN Las Vegas.
Area 2000 on a Sunday evening, of course. I'm Art Bell. My guest is Richard C. Hoagland. And back to it we go. Richard, how much do you know about the capability of the observer. Now, in terms of the kind of detail and photographs that it could have received, or depending on your point of view, is receiving. I know that we've got a series of KH sky satellites that they say can resolve little tiny things on time.
Right. Did this use that level of technology?
Well, close to it. Remember, this is a civilian space agency, so we're not supposed to have access to the, the best and the brightest and the high level of black positive technology.
So the camera that no one can broke and was carrying on the coastline was pretty
Which resolves something the size of a coffee table on the Martian surface and a little over 230 miles above the surface in Mars orbit. Now compare that to the smallest object, the smallest pixel that the Viking images from 17 years ago could resolve, and that was half a football field. You can see that we've made a gain of between 30 and 50 times in resolution, and the photographs, which should have come back, both of the monuments of Mars and all kinds of other objects on the planet, would have been literally stunning. They would have knocked your socks off, and there would have been no doubt, absolutely zero doubt in the mind of anybody, after looking at these pictures, that we were looking at artificial objects at Cydonia, which of course, if I may be, given the editorial license here, is why NASA has hid the mission and the spacecraft from us. They did not dare to give us that kind of data, because then the fat would be in the fire. Then we'd be arguing over who built them, not where they built.
All right. This has always bothered me about this theory, Richard. If such is the case, it was $1 billion mission, $1 billion spacecraft, something like that.
980 million, but who's going to call over, million years?
All right. If they knew that all this stuff was there, why launch in the first place?
All right, that's a very good question, and let me try to give you an answer from the perspective of 30 years of being a NASA launcher and also a NASA consultant.
Okay.
NASA is a unique federal agency. What people don't understand, and which I hope after tonight they will understand, is that NASA is the weak link in the government cover-up. Because when NASA gets into the act gets into the act. That is the Space Act. NASA was created back in 1958 by an act of Congress which mandates the widest and appropriate dissemination of all the science results. Bottom line is, there's very little in terms of data that NASA can, by law, keep secret. Now, they can keep methods, because some of their methods, infringe and lap over into the DoD, the Defense Department. So there are many missions where we don't know how data is acquired, but under law, we should know what data is acquired if it's of, strictly scientific objects or scientific inquiries. And unless you admit a priori that there are ruins on Mars, and that's why you're not going to make the pictures public, there's not a legal leg that NASA can stand on to keep the pictures secret. They have to lie. And if they lie, it means they're violating federal law, and if they violate federal law, somebody in NASA is going to go to jail if you catch them.
All right, minus the evidence that the observer would have, or is, again, depending on your point of view, provided. What is your best evidence, do you suppose, Richard, for the existence of these ruins, the face, all the rest of it? What is our best evidence right now?
Let me finish answering your other question, and then I'll get to that.
Sure.
You asked, why would NASA think they could go there in secret and take pictures? Because no one has ever questioned NASA before. NASA is like, the guys with the white hats, the impervious chain mail, until the Challenger disaster, where we tragically lost 7 astronauts, and until Hubble, NASA could do no wrong. I think it's ironic that we're having the show tonight 2 days from the launch of the Endeavour mission
For the Hubble.
going up to fix Hubble, right? NASA has come a long way, baby, since it could do no wrong. Since it got us to the moon, it built, 50-foot tall heroes. NASA has been living for a long time on a tarnished image. And I say tarnished because when you look behind the myth, you find that there are some very strange things going on. And what I think, personally, as a speculation, is that NASA thought it could live on the myth. It thought it could go to Mars in secret and pretend it was doing it in public. They never imagined, I really believe, that we would generate the kind of political groundswell the kind of media observation and critique that would force them basically to decide between an open mission and no mission. And my evidence to support that theory is that the spacecraft was lost, Mars Observer was lost. It was announced that it was lost on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time on August 21st, all right?
Right.
That was literally as Dr. Bevan French, who was the Mars Observer Program scientist, and I was getting off ABC's Good Morning America after a coast-to-coast debate where basically French and NASA lost the debate in terms of why not take the pictures of Sidonia and why keep them secret. And it was at 11 o'clock when that program went off after the host and ABC in essence sided with us that NASA just coincidentally announced to AP, Associated Press, Lee Siegel, there in Los Angeles, that it had lost Mars Observer 12 hours before, sometime on the previous Saturday night. And of course, you know, I put, well, why were they waiting 12 hours? Are they going to wait to notify the next of kin? Because again, speculation, it seems pretty clear to those of us in this project that what they were waiting for was to see how politically their secret mission was going to fly. When it looked obvious to anybody that it was not going to fly, that's when somebody put into position Plan B, and that's when they in essence pulled the plug.
Still, that had to be, prior to launch, one of the things, if all this is true, that they considered. In other words, option A, option B. Option B, which they apparently, you believe, took, is so incredibly damaging to NASA and their future budgetary hopes that I would think they would not have done that, rather not launched at all. Then,
Art, suppose this is bigger than NASA. You see, this is where we come full circle. I mean, the fact that I'm doing your show tonight, a program devoted to UFOs and things that go bump in the night,
right,
should be some measure of how robust this evidence has become. Because if we have ruins on another world, which Mars Observer could have verified for the entire planet Earth's approval and approbation, then immediately, once you have demonstrated there are ET ruins on another body in the solar system, all of the problems and all of the potentials of the UFO phenomena come falling out of the government closet.
absolutely.
If you can prove there is one wrench, one stone, one built artifact anywhere else on this planet, you have opened the door to a galaxy filled with other life forms, and you have made credible, not proved, but at least credible, the idea that somebody out there could come here and in fact could be coming here right now. The only way the government can keep that door from being forced open is to forever keep us in the dark and to keep us from ever seeing one picture of a bona fide artifact sitting on another planet. And that's why I think the question here is bigger than the fate of NASA. The question is the fate of the 50, 30, 70 years, however long it's been, that we have been given the lie that the human race is in fact alone in the universe.
All right, very good, Richard. That does describe a motive. Now we do get to my other question. How sure are we? There are monuments. How sure are we that face is just not some weird geographic circumstance? In other words, what is the evidence that these things are on Mars?
Well, if you asked me that, let's see, even 5 years ago, I would have given you a very qualified, very conservative, very, quote, scientific answer. Tonight, I can be much more forthcoming. I have no doubt in my mind. You know, it's 99.999% that they're there. Not so much because of the artifacts themselves, but because of what we have discovered because of the artifacts. There's a very important phenomenon in science called the power of specific prediction. The power of a scientific theory is not in terms of proving the theory, but in terms of what the theory predicts that you will find elsewhere than in the theory. And what we have found elsewhere than the theory that there are structures on Mars is a physics which has allowed us to look across the solar system and to see other phenomena operating in the Sun, in Jupiter, in Neptune, and even here on Earth, and to put that into a coherent new physics which has extraordinary power of prediction, extraordinary power of the prediction of a technology which will evolve from that physics, and in fact already has. And it was for the physics that I was given the International Excellence in Science Award by the Angstrom Foundation this year in a ceremony in Washington 2 days after NASA announced that it launched the spacecraft, because the physics that comes from the geometry of the monuments of Mars is the powerful predictive side of the fact that there are artifacts. So for us, in this project, and obviously for the Angstrom people, the discussion has moved light years beyond are there artifacts. It now is into what do the artifacts mean, and how can we harness that meaning in other areas of science.
All right, give me a sense, if you would, though, before I declare it to be so, of how the physics backs up or proves the fact that these are not casual geographic coincidences. What sort of physics do you apply to come to that conclusion?
Okay, let me try to do this very briefly and without the pictures. It's very difficult to do this without the pictures. And if people want to see the pictures, we have put out a series of briefing tapes. You mentioned the NASA briefings, you mentioned the UN briefings.
Right.
These are available on home video if you want to see, chapter and verse and good, color computer graphics and all of the stuff that I'm going to describe. If you want to see it laid out in explicit detail, I'd recommend that you get those home videos. But for those who have not seen videos, it's probably worthwhile pictures. What we have online are a set of structures. The center piece of which is a mile long, 1,500 foot high humanoid image. It looks like that. So that's something that we are for. Highly accredited mathematical patterns are a set of other objects, pyramids, linear formations, circular formations with multiple tiers. These are arranged in this extraordinary geometry and repetitive geometry, and it's the repetition that's important, Art, because in repetition there is signal against noise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those are repetitive, noise is random.
Mm-hmm.
From this geometry, my colleagues and myself, some of whose names I could give you if you're interested, people like Errol Torrens, and a set of mathematical constants, which are in essence the fundamental constants of physics all over the universe. And from these constants, we were led to a specific kind of geometry called hyperdimensional geometry. That is a geometry that a subgroup of mathematicians for 100 years have been writing papers about and publishing in the mathematical literature.
You're going to have to give us. You're going to have to give us a layman's definition of that.
Right. Well, hyperdimensions means more than 3 dimensions.
Yes.
4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, 6, whatever.
Right.
This has been considered theoretical up till now. What we've discovered is that some of the mathematical predictions of these higher dimensions predict specific things, specific phenomena that one might see on real objects like planets if one were to look. And when we looked, lo and behold, we found the stuff that was predicted that we would find. Energy upwellings at specific latitudes, geometric patterns in the clouds circling the poles, excess energy emissions where there should be no energy coming from inside the planets because planets are not stars, they're not supposed to be generating excess energy, things like this. And all of this began with this set of geometry encoded in these objects grouped around the face that I have come to call the monuments of Mars. Now, if you follow the logic train, it's impossible under any normal conditions to run the latitude of the great dark spot on Neptune, which we did in a paper we published in CompuServe 2 weeks before Voyager 2 arrived at Neptune, predicated on the reality of a set of structures on another planet, unless the structures are real, unless the mathematical logic chain is real, unless the predictions have real power. So that's why I consider the great calculus, backed up by the ancient people, that in fact we're dealing not only with the reality of structures on Mars, but structures that no doubt to give us a fundamental new view of physics and how the universe really works. And of course, if you followed any of the discussions over SETI messages, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence over the last 30 or more years, this kind of fundamental information about how the universe functions is exactly in the forefront of what anybody from Sagan to Drake to Morrison have been saying a SETI message would contain. The only problem is they were predicting that it would come by means of radio from someplace safely many, many, many light years away, and we found this kind of fundamental information encoded in the geometric layout of a group of structures on a nearby planet known as Mars.
Well, Richard, call me dimensionally challenged if you wish, but I'm still not somehow grasping. In other words, you you have, from these structures, devised some new basis of physics?
It turns out to be very old. We have now discovered two separate groups of scientists here on Earth who have been working with this physics for the last 100 years, Art, and we never knew it. I mentioned one group. They're called mathematical topologists. A topologist is a mathematician who can look at a donut and a cup of coffee, and you and me can say they're all the same. So you do not send mathematical topologists to Dunkin' Donuts to bring back donuts, all right?
Yes.
The other group of scientists, it turns out, who have been working or began to work with this identical higher dimensional reality base for physics were the physicists themselves. You probably have heard of a guy named James Clerk Maxwell.
The name is familiar.
Maxwell's equations.
Yes.
Without Maxwell's equations, you and I would not be having this conversation, and none of your listeners out in radio land would be listening to us tonight. Maxwell's equations describe the electromagnetic phenomenon of radio, as well as light, as well as ultraviolet, infrared, X-rays, the whole spectrum whereby you and I are having this conversation for your audience this evening. What you do not know, and which many people do not know, is that Maxwell, 100 years ago, originally wrote his 200-plus equations completely describing electromagnetic theory in 4 space terms, in higher dimensional terms. They were later simplified, I love that phrase, by a guy named Oliver Heaviside, another physicist, about 20 years later. And we were only given 4 of the original 200 equations, and those, the 4 space terms, had been eliminated from the equations. So for the last 100 years, physics has been limping along with it's almost like putting dark glasses on and not looking at the real universe. And we've only discovered this in the last couple of months, that Maxwell's original equations were predicated on, founded on, implicitly incorporated higher dimensional 4 space terms called, for those mathematically inclined in your audience, quaternions. And anybody out there can check in the ancient history books, not the modern physics texts, in the really initial ones about 100 years ago, and they will discover the truth of the statement. Now, what's interesting to me, given, somewhat of a perspective of paranoia about government cover-ups in terms of UFOs, is that we seem, every time in the last 100 years we were going to get a handle on this physics, we seem to have taken the wrong turn. Now, did we take this wrong turn by accident? Or did we take it because there perhaps has been a larger perspective that did not want us to know that physics might apply to more than 3 dimensions? I don't have an answer for that question, but it's an interesting question to pose, because the power of hyperdimensional physics not only gives you, quote, free energy, a term that I'm sure has been discussed on your show more than once.
Yes.
It also gives you control of gravity. And there are a few things flying around in the skies over your head, if not tonight, on other nights that I've heard about, that I believe are part of a secret government project to apply the real Maxwell's equations in a black-budgeted program that's been at least 30 to 40 years in the making. And that if you see UFOs in terrestrial skies, there's an even likelihood that they're ours, that we built them using very fundamental, secret, hyperdimensional physics and technology paid for by your and my tax money.
All right, now, believe it or not, that seems reasonable to me, Richard. I've seen it recently, a UFO. I had my own experience, finally, first one I ever saw in my life. But that aside for a second, when you take this new hyperdimensional physics and you go to a conventional physicist and lay it out for him, what is the usual reaction?
Well, it starts out with incredulity, and then you point them to the literature, to Maxwell, to the topologists, and they come back to you and they say, I'm going to have to really think about this. And we have evidence that, this is happening all over the country. There's a gentleman I think you're going to have on your show in a couple, 3 weeks, Dr. Stanley McDaniel.
Yes.
Who is an epistemologist, he's an ethicist, he's an historian of science, and he is the former chairman of the philosophy department of Sonoma State University. About a year ago, Stan McDaniel called me up and he said, I'm doing a paper on all you guys who've been talking about this Mars stuff, would you send me some references? Would you send me some things? Thus began a dialogue. A year later, McDaniel produced about a 200-page document, now called the McDaniel Report, which not only went into chapter and verse all our investigation into the monuments of Mars, our methodologies, our measurements, our controls, the background of everybody who was involved in this project, the precision of measurement, everything you could think of that would, tend to discredit or validate our approach. But he also went into the tertiary implications, including the physics. It is McDaniel's conclusion that on the whole, those of us involved in this independent investigation have done some pretty good science, and by contrast, NASA has done no science, and most important is that there is an area of physics here that should be explored and expanded, and it was after he reached that conclusion that independently the Angstrom Foundation awarded us the medal this year for the physics associated with the object of Cydonia. I heartily recommend to your audience the time they're going to spend with Dr. McDaniel on your show, because here is a person who has the sweep of science, has the perspective of how science should be done when it works at its best, and who has basically come along as the independent peer review of all of us who've been trying to put some rigor into this very flaky field, and who has basically validated not only our methodologies, but many of our most important conclusions.
Richard, very briefly, without going into all the detail that I've gone into before, I live in the Pahrump Valley, which is about 65 miles west of Las Vegas, and a valley or so adjacent to Area 51. And one night not long ago, I saw a very large triangular craft that came not more than 150 feet above my stopped automobile in the dead quiet. It was a full moon, very much like tonight, without the eclipse part of it. And I could see the substance of this craft. It was dead flat black against the lighter sky, and it literally floated at a slow speed, slower than would be able to keep it in aerodynamic flight, and utterly quiet. Since that time, I've had all kinds of people send me information on this kind of a craft and this kind of technology, but it would seem to me that the kind of physics you're talking about would be required to do something like that, because it wasn't flying, Richard, it was floating. And wouldn't it take that exact sort of technology to achieve that?
Exactly. But you see, this is the important part. This is where we can get into a wonderful discussion about, the hours are there. I believe, and this is again a personal perspective, that an awful lot of the captive UFO, captivating technology stories coming out of Nevada and their government are in fact deliberate misinformation to keep the New York Times from ever taking seriously the idea that this is a physics that we ourselves have mastered 100 years ago, and then very quietly suppressed. Everybody is familiar, or at least they should be familiar, with the history of Nikola Tesla.
Yes.
And you know what I'm going to say?
Yes.
Tesla wanted to harness the energy of the Earth, which is nothing more than another way of saying hyperdimensional physics, to beam, to broadcast free electric power, essentially power too cheap to meter, from all over the planet to be picked up by relatively inexpensive receivers on homes and cars and boats and stuff like that.
Right.
Industrialist J.P. Morgan was backing him in his research until he discovered what Tesla, for whom the 20th century would not exist without Nikola Tesla. Everybody thinks it's Edison and Westinghouse and all that. It's Tesla that is making the lights, go on in your